How's it going, everybody, and welcome to How Good Is It Really? My name is Jeremiah.
I'm Luke.
And today we're going to be covering episode 3 of Obi-Wan Kenobi.
All right, let's jump right into it. So, again, Star Wars. Right now, I think people are just on burnout. I think there's a lot of negative attention surrounding this episode.
You think?
I think so. Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of negative reviews lately. I don't think it deserves quite the bad press it's
I
getting.
don't think I've watched any reviews for it yet.
I watched
Not yet.
one. I just watched one. Like I said in the previous episode for Obi-Wan, I always go into these things cold turkey. I just learned my lesson.
Well, yeah,
It's
but even
better to do
after
that.
having seen it, I haven't gone back to
Okay, fair.
watch any reviews or stuff. I was just like the general feeling of the show, episode 3, is that we're in Act 2. You're in the middle portion of
It's boring
of the show.
until it's not, and then it's over. That's pretty much the premise of 3. There's some really good character development. There are some decent fight scenes. There is a lot more dialogue that is much deeper than the first 2 episodes. And the little girl playing Leia is doing a great job and is much more likable in this episode than she was in the previous 2, mainly because she spends less time mouthing off to everybody around her and is just much more relatable as a kid. I felt like in this episode, she's more it's more believable that she's 10 years old as opposed to being like an adult trapped in a child's body.
Character beats and some better character beats in this episode than the first 2. The first 2 was a lot of setup, getting people to places so they can get things done kind of thing, and now we're in that weird middle section where, like I said, it's Act 2, where not a whole lot's really happening just yet. A little more setup, you get some character development in the middle, and then by the time we get to like episodes 5 and 6, then we're in Act 3 and you get the big resolution to the story.
Yeah.
And generally how these things work.
So I'm going to talk about lore for a second.
Okay.
So the one
Grab something.
there were a couple things that kind of bugged me that I noticed about this, and they weren't huge world-breaking things, but I feel like Star Wars or Disney doesn't know how to keep their canon consistent. I feel like is probably something that I think is going to bug most people, and I'm still trying to figure out if they're going to ruin this or not, because a lot of people are saying in A New Hope, when Obi-Wan and Darth Vader meet on the Death Star, in that scene that everybody remembers, the swords are crossed, and then Obi-Wan disappears as Vader supposedly cuts him down. Anyway, in that segment, there's a couple lines of dialogue where some people have always assumed that Vader and Obi-Wan had never met or seen each other since where just whatever X moment before had precluded that moment. Here's the problem. We assume...
If it's their assumption...
That's the thing, is that it's based on an assumption, which...
That doesn't matter.
That's your fault.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that canon moment... but it could be one of 2 ways. They could screw it up, but so far they haven't.
No.
But it could be a possibility. We just don't know yet.
But nothing they've done so far
No.
messes with anything that's come previously in the films that I'm aware of. Not
Yeah,
that I've noticed anyway.
That was the only continuity thing that I noticed. This episode's kind of
Okay, do you want to
boring.
run through the categories real quick? It
Yeah.
wasn't that boring. It was a shorter episode, too.
It's a little dry. Until
All right.
it's not, and then it's over. Hit the categories.
Okay, let's just run through the categories real quick, and then we'll get to what we actually want to talk about.
Exactly. That's what you guys are waiting for anyway, so we'll just get through the arbitrary stuff.
Writing, I actually really enjoyed this episode.
Writing's good. Dialogue, like I said, that
dialogue-
moment where they're kind of
Dialogue
in the
was
middle.
wonderful. Some of the story beats, like actual writing of some of the story bits,
A little off.
a little hit a few misses for me anyway.
Yeah.
And I think there was some confusion with some stuff. I'd go 8 for the writing. Like it's,
Sure.
it's still good. I want to go 9 for the dialogue, but
Yeah.
I can't.
I'll give it a... I'll go with you on 8. That's fine.
8? Okay.
Yeah, it's decent.
Acting, really
Oh,
good.
good.
Everybody was fantastic. 9.
Extras are great too. That was one thing I noticed towards the end. We're not going to talk about spoilers. We will though. We'll give you a warning ahead of time.
We'll get there.
You should be watching it though. It's good, but the extras did a great job.
Yeah, all the some physical acting and a lot of like voice acting for some of the extras, whether they be stormtroopers or aliens and like makeup and stuff, where it's like you never know if it's really the person in the suit delivering the lines, at least on the spot, but it's all wonderful. I go 9 on the acting. It was really
Sure,
good.
yeah, I'm right there. 9.
Cinematography.
Wow.
There's some really good shots.
There's some really good shots.
And some really fantastic
This planet that they go to,
scenes that are shot.
it's boring, and it looks like it was shot in my backyard. And
yeah, a little bit.
It's because of where we live, specifically in Utah.
Yeah,
it's straight up. I was trying to figure out if there were a couple shots where I was like, wait, I know where that is. But there, legitimately, it looked like it was shot right in our backyard. So that kind of broke it a little bit for me, just because I'm used to seeing.
I didn't really bump into that when I was watching it. But now that you mention it, it's like, yeah, a little bit. I can see it.
Yeah, the sage and the Joshua trees. It totally is the high desert, somewhere between California and Utah. I don't know where it was shot. If you guys know, let us know. But would not shock me in the least to know that this was filmed somewhere like outside of Vegas or something. That's like right there. But anyway, that's just anyway.
But, yeah, what you thinking?
I'm gonna go with an 8.
An 8?
Yeah.
Okay. 8's across the board. That's what it's looking like.
Yeah, it's right there, just above average is what it is. That's what we gave the first 2 episodes.
8's is well above average.
Well, I mean,
for me. Again, he starts
Fine.
at 10 and goes down. I start at 5 and go up.
There we go. Okay, so yeah, I guess it's glass half full, glass half empty.
Yeah. Editing.
Good.
Yeah, 7. It's good. Like nothing specific stands out like it did in some of the first episode mainly. Second episode a little bit too.
They could have done better to build the tension a little bit more towards the end of the episode, so I'm going to say 7 for the editing.
That's exactly what I was thinking. 7.
That's the only real thing I noticed was just that the editing's not. It's a little bit like, for as dramatic as the ending of this episode is, or it's meant to be, it doesn't come across that way. At least I didn't feel like it did.
There may be some other factors to that.
It's possible for sure.
One of them being score and soundtrack.
There was no music. I don't even remember there being music in this episode.
I do.
Okay.
There's a couple spots that actually stood out to me.
Okay.
Because of the music in this episode. So I think for me, the music in this one at least worked more towards the episode as a whole. Because there were actually some memorable spots where it's like, while I was watching it, I was like, oh, like you're actually listening to the music and it's cueing some of the things that are happening on screen, and it just felt more integrated and part of building tension or suspense or whatever they want you to feel.
I didn't even notice
on screen. So for me, I did notice. So I think we gave music like a 7 last time.
That's pretty much
I think
where
it's
I'm
a
at
bump
this
up
time.
for me. I wouldn't mind going 8, but
I didn't even notice at all.
Okay.
Did literally nothing for me at
7's for you, 8's for me. Effects, it's Star Wars. Visual effects, like
I got to riff on this for just a second.
Go for
little things. Star Wars has always been known for really 2 things: the sets, which look lived in and old, because George Lucas was a fan of westerns and Akira Kurosawa samurai films, and they were meant to be. It was just this different take on sci-fi, which was always this clean, very antiseptically perfect environment, and he made it lived in, and it worked, and it looks good, and he kind of just cemented that as being a trope of Star Wars. The sound effects are also, for Star Wars, legendary. I mean, they've literally built an entire department that gets used by everybody for sound design. The sounds in this movie are great. The effects are wonderful. It's very believable. Obi-Wan's lightsaber, I don't know why it's different from both the original trilogy and the prequels. I don't get why they can't figure that out, but they changed it. I noticed. Some people will. If it doesn't bother you, it doesn't bother you.
Didn't notice at all.
I build lightsabers for a living. It bothered me. That's the only thing that I had to say about that.
But for the actual visual effects part.
Good. 8. Yeah.
8. Okay, set deck, costumes, wardrobe.
Why
so this
can't...
would be
the
lightsaber difference in the hill.
So, one thing for sure. We see Darth Vader in this episode. I'm not giving anything away because he's hinted at in the first 2. If you haven't seen those...
Yeah, technically,
why are you watching our review?
The second one anyway.
Yeah, why are you watching our review? I didn't know that anyway, but... Why can't Disney keep certain things consistent? Darth Vader's helmet, we know how it comes apart. We know how it comes apart because we've seen how it comes apart in 3 places. We've seen it in Empire Strikes Back, first of all, when you see the back of Vader's head in his meditation chamber when the helmet is getting lowered down. And we know that the cowl around the eyes down to the top of the nose is a detachable section from the faceplate. We know in Return of the Jedi that faceplate is second from the collar and the helmet piece. In this, we see both come down together. It bothered me because it's lazy.
Question.
Go ahead.
How was it in Episode 3?
In Return of the Jedi? Or
No.
So first the front half goes on because it comes off this way. It's not just a drop down. It actually like molds onto Vader's face because he can't live without it. It's literally a respirator so that he can breathe because his lungs have been damaged from the inhalation of the sulfur and from being cooked like a human s'more on the edge of a friggin' lava river. So the helmet, though, comes down over the top of it, and I don't really know what purpose that serves other than just to seal the whole thing hermetically. But the front half is actually, it like comes off and goes on this way, and that's how.
Because my only thought would be is just like an evolution of the design in universe.
It's possible, but they don't explain it, and it's lazy.
Different.
But no, that's internally inconsistent, though, because
models or like iterations of the suit or like an evolution of the technology.
Well, if that were
but
true,
that wouldn't make sense
no.
if it's the same in like at the end of Episode 3 and the same in the original trilogy and this
right.
in the middle.
Yeah, there's a gap where it doesn't make sense. It's just lazy. Prop people, get it right. Same people who couldn't figure out how a friggin' lightsaber comes on. They're like, the button's here, and then it's here, and then it's here. It's
right there.
Yeah, it's the friggin' the card, the big long square thing on the top.
You just slide it up.
Yeah. Not hard, people. The big oval button at the top was never used for anything. If you think you were being fancy and extra, you just look dumb. Because everybody who knew Star Wars caught it, and then you blamed us for being nitpicky.
I don't know that much about lightsaber hilts. Not one.
Yeah, this is my life. I literally
That's
do this
fair.
for a living. Anyway, that's the two things that really irked me about it. Other than that, everything was beautiful. Okay. The set was gorgeous. Except for the fact that they were literally, like in the desert somewhere, and it was super low budget for that portion of it. But the blasters, the actual like caravans that the troop transports, and then the little truck that they move around in, the village that they're in, again, looks like another typical Tatooine poverty Star Wars village.
Sounds like an 8.
Yeah, it's an 8. Yeah, it's straight up an 8. And then they just get into it, and at the very end. We're not gonna talk about that, but there is a rock quarry, and that just felt lazy too.
We'll get there. You were kind of talking about this before: audio mixing and sound design. Star Wars.
Yeah, it's good. I cannot say a single negative thing other than the fact that Obi-Wan's lightsaber activation sound is different because reasons.
I would never notice. I would never notice that.
It's just those little internal inconsistencies that just feel like oversights because someone didn't care enough to get it right. For a company that prides itself on, like, we care about canon so much that we eliminated all of this garbage material, which really just we didn't want to pay anybody royalties and we wanted to make a new Star Wars in our own image to try to, like, sell toys to kids that don't buy them. Anyway. Yeah, it's just little things like that just, I don't get it. Why? Just get it right. It's little things. Little things. Little things.
Directing.
Oof. Okay. I'm going to save my opinion on that for the spoilers, because I don't know how we can talk about the writing, because I'm pretty sure at this point Deborah Chow
give me
is
a number.
7.
Really?
Yeah, really.
Okay. Seems low.
It is low. And I think deservedly low.
It's not that low. Not really.
I've seen far worse. And that's the thing. This episode's getting a lot of shade from some people, prolific channels that I know, and I usually agree with 100% of everything they have to say. And I do agree in some ways. I think it's getting panned a little bit too hard, and I think that's just Star Wars burnout. I think a lot of the hardcore fans are just done, being told what to like, because we already know what we like about Star Wars, and we just wanted that Star Wars. And people, well, that's not what writing and film is about. It's about making art. True, but then again, there are certain things that are exempt from that, and Star Wars is above and all else a franchise for selling toys to children. That is not exclusively why the films were made, and a lot of people will say that, and that usually gets my Knickers in a Twist 2 and be like, Star Wars was made for little kids. No, it wasn't.
Not necessarily.
It was made for everyone. There's something to enjoy there if you are old or if you were young. I remember my dad went and saw it in at the Chinese Ramen Theater. I believe that's what it's called, right there in L.A. When it came out in 1977. And my father loved it. They went back to see it multiple times. And then I was raised on it. And then I continue to watch it as an adult. I will have my children watch it. Like, there's something there for everybody is what I'm trying to say. It's not exclusively made for children, but I digress. I'd go off every time it's Star Wars.
Okay.
Let's get through these categories. We talk about the overall enjoyment. 7.
I knew it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Talk while I do math.
Okay. I mean, we're going to get into spoilers, so I'll try to save that for later. But as far as, like, if you're watching this and at this point you're going to know I'm the guy with the woke radar, there really isn't that much wokeness in this episode. I know there's some people who disagree, and there's some people who say, you're absolutely right, there's not. I think there's a little bit. I think it's really sneaky, though, the way it's in there. And not everyone's going to agree. I don't think Jeremiah will either. This is definitely something where you get called a conspiracy theorist until someone comes out that's in charge and says, oh, we absolutely did this. But it seems like they're doing to Obi-Wan what they did to Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi, which is that they are trying to break down a paragon of male virtue in this series. Like, Obi-Wan has always stood for being the unshakable, unflappable good guy of the series. Yeah, he's space Jesus. Like, he does everything right until he doesn't, and he ends up beating himself up about, which I can understand. If that's where they're going with, they need to start saying so, because what it feels like is that Obi-Wan is getting cucked in his own show. It feels like he is a side character, and it also feels like he's just in this permanent, just kind of panic mode. Every time there's a lightsaber on screen, he freaks out, and
we haven't gotten to spoiler section yet.
It's true, but he held his lightsaber in the previous 2 episodes as well.
Yeah,
and there's just it's just he needs to get his balls back, and we need to see the Obi-Wan that we remember. And if they're going to go there, they need to start getting on with it, because at this point, Obi-Wan feels weak. And not weak understandably, because obviously he's recovering off the end of Order 66, and Anakin being cooked alive at the edge of a lava river.
Yeah.
It's understandable that he would have some stress and have some real guilt, some lingering guilt. We're also talking about somebody who, in Disney canon, so don't preach at me about how, it's not canon, you can't, you. Mace Windu, the head of the council, stated that Obi-Wan was the master of the Surisu form of lightsaber combat, and besides Yoda, was the only other lightsaber wielder that Mace considered to be an expert, above and beyond anybody else. And that is canon. That is actual canon.
Okay.
We are not seeing anything like that in this film, and this is Disney canon. I want to see the Obi-Wan that I remember from A New Hope, Alec Guinness's Obi-Wan, who was not afraid, was not a scared little rabbit, and was not terrified at the sight of a lightsaber. And I would like to see Ewan McGregor's take on it from the original trilogy, which was just this... He was just the father figure that everybody wanted. He was just understanding, and he was caring, he was patient, and he was, above and all else, had a plan, and was just not prone to flipping out or having emotional incidents, which he's not doing here either. So I will not say that. Mm-hmm. That's kind of where I'm going to start there, and I'll let you go from there.
Well, I don't know where to go from there.
I could riff on Star Wars for hours. This is absolutely it is my heart and soul. So,
okay. Well, our initial rating is going to be 77 for you, 78 for me.
Yeah, I think that's
higher. Overall, yeah, it's still good. If you probably have already watched it. If you haven't, go watch it. Yeah, and now we're going to get into spoilers.
Yeah. Okay. Now
the whole tirade you just went on like. You should have waited like 5 minutes. 5 minutes.
Well, I didn't give too many spoilers away. At least I don't think I talked about anything prolific. So do we want to talk about the biggest scene first, or we want to lead up to it?
I actually took notes this time. So I have my
I've
notes.
talked too much already.
Order.
You go for it. I talk way too much when it comes to Star Wars.
What's my first note? Oh, the first thing I wrote down was I'm glad that they. I kind of figured they were going to spin it this way. We're getting into spoilers now, if that wasn't clear.
Yep.
Spoilers going forward.
You've been warned.
I like when people in shows are intelligent and smart and like figure things out,
Not the dumb
and make
blonde
the right
in the horror
decision.
movie. Yeah.
But just that, was it Reva?
Yeah.
That Reva kind of figured it would go this way, but Reva blames Kenobi for the death of the Grand Inquisitor. Makes sense that she would do that because...
Yeah, she's playing it, obviously, because if they found out that she just, ran him through, that obviously that would be treason, and she would be...
Exactly. So
dead.
It's easy. You just off the dude, and then, Kenobi did it. I mean, he's...
Conveniently no witnesses, everybody
previous
believes her.
general of the, whatever.
The old
general
Republic. Yeah,
of,
the
old Republic,
Republic.
whatever. Yeah, I don't know names of things. I'm not...
Yeah,
I don't know.
clearly Disney doesn't either, because now they have the High Republic.
But yeah, it was just like, oh, that makes sense. Well, wasn't the High Republic like a thing before anyway?
No, it was the Old Republic, and then it was the New Republic, which is the era that we know of, which is where you have the Civil War, the split, and there's kind of a golden era before that if you are into comic books and things like that. Tales of the Jedi, not the Disney one that just got released at Celebration, because they co-opted that. Friggin' stole it. The real Tales of the Jedi, much better. But anyway, no, there's the Republic. Okay. The Old Republic is different completely. There was no High Republic. Sounds like a Cheech and Chong special. Anyway.
Okay, you done?
Yeah. I'm so salty when it comes to Disney Star Wars. But
The next thing I noticed, though, was Vader's room looks really cool.
It did.
When
the palace.
Towards the beginning, right, when we're on Mustafar, and we go into
think
Vader's throne room there.
Hey, if you know if it's a different planet, because I know in Rogue One, I thought that was Mustafar as well, and it's not. It's another planet. So I could be wrong. But I'm pretty sure it's Mustafar.
Where were they on Mustafar in Rogue One?
For a brief moment when Krennic goes to Vader to tell him that the Death Star is almost complete.
Oh.
And then he almost gets choked to death.
Yeah.
That's the scene.
Careful not to choke on your aspirations.
Yes.
Oh, you got jokes now, huh?
Ha-ha.
But yeah, again, Vader's room, it just looks cool. I don't know why. Vader's still cool.
He'll always be cool. And we were talking about this, actually. A lot of people still hating on Reva, not because we're racist, but because she's a one-dimensional villain. I think, though, I'm starting to understand what they're doing here.
I don't have a problem with her.
I think the reason why is because, we were talking about this, Vader will never be the villain that you hate.
He's the villain, of course, but he will never be unlikable.
He's first and foremost a tragic hero, and then at the end,
he's a tragic hero.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because
why? Because he finally repents of his sins in the last 5 minutes.
Well, because he dies.
Oh, you already killed me, so now I'm going to pretend to be good, so I can become one with the Force. No, screw off with that.
More like
BS.
He died because he chose to suffocate by breathing the air free of his suit, which was damaged. You can argue that, but he could have survived. Chose not to. Chose to die.
Perhaps
and be left behind.
Could have survived, or was already dying and just made the last minute decision to make right with his son.
Well,
so he
come on. So if you remember
in
the Return of the Jedi, in that final sequence, Vader just loses a hand. He's just beat, tired. But his suit is fine. He's still breathing normal.
Yes.
He makes a decision and choice between the Emperor and his son, picks the Emperor up, and kills him by throwing him down a reactor shaft. And the electricity fries his suit.
That's what I was going to point out.
So that choice of choosing in that moment to do the right thing is what I think makes him the tragic hero of the Star Wars saga. That's tragic, the whole point and purpose behind it.
Yes, hero questionable.
I mean, I guess we could talk about anti-heroes and the hero's journey and things like that.
He's not even an anti-hero.
No, I don't think he is. But I was just in the subject of what makes a hero a hero. That could be its own episode. But
barely
that being said,
redemption.
Vader's castle's cool. And he will never be disliked, which is why, bring back to my original point, Reva is so unlikable.
Moses
She's
Ingram,
supposed to be.
I believe is the actress's
yes.
name. And she's doing a fantastic job. I think she's doing exactly what she's
supposed
to be doing.
She has no facial expressions.
I mean, she has some.
None. She moves her eyebrows twice.
I wasn't watching her eyebrows. Sorry.
And she just, there's the only thing recognizable because she doesn't emote. There's no facial expressions. She's just either angry or bored, or a combination of crafty bored. I'm being a little bit too harsh, but legitimately, I don't think Moses Ingram is the reason why people don't like Reva. I think Reva, the character, is one-dimensional and dislikable, but I think it's intentional because nobody is going to dislike Vader. I was like, yeah, it's cool. When he's dragging people out of their homes and like killing random
dislikable villain. You need someone to root against. Like, we're not rooting against Vader. Sorry, we're not.
No, it's no one wants Vader to get chopped up or die. Like, people want Vader to be Vader.
So it's zero stakes. Unless you have some other characters in the show
that
you can do something with.
Because we know what's going to happen, and everybody knows what's going to happen. Yeah. Vader is there for member berries, and he's there to advance a plot line. Still, we don't know exactly what the purpose and point yet of is. However,
going back to Reva, though.
Go.
I was going to point out, this is one of the music portions of the show.
Was there a cue that I just missed somewhere?
And it was, I don't know why the shot was this long, but I kind of like it in retrospect, just because, like, and even while it was happening, it was like, man, this is kind of cool. And then the music kicked in, it's like, yeah, this feels cool. This feels good. And it's just when she's walking. She gets to the Inquisitor
now
headquarters.
I remember when she's walking that montage of her just walking, and she's people just like saluting left and right. Yeah.
And then the music is just like building. And, like, the tension just, like,
growing. I remember that
and growing while she's walking. And it finally, like, the music, you have that release of tension, like, when she exits the doors into the chamber where was it the third brother?
Yeah, the two Inquisitors.
Yeah, are sitting and they have their conversation. It's just, like, leading up to that, it's like, that's one of those spots where the music was actually noticeable for me. Where it's like, okay, I liked it.
And I just might have noticed because when... There's kind of I don't think it's fair to say that whoever wrote the music is not doing a good job. I think it's just so similar to what we expect that it kind of washes over me. Because the music that stood out to me when I heard it for the first time was The Mandalorian. And that's because it was written to be different. And it's so different that it became iconic. And it's one of my favorite soundtracks. I love the soundtrack for The Mandalorian. The theme song is amazing. I never hit skip when it comes on. Ever. Just because I love listening to the whole thing. This show, I don't think is doing a bad job with music. I just missed it because
there's nothing that's really standing out except that one moment. Like, I actually was memorable.
And I missed that completely. Totally. I was looking at the architecture and the stormtroopers and the officers walking around.
A lot of cool stuff. A lot of cool stuff in that shot. Just her walking, but it's cool.
Yeah, that's what I was paying attention to. So I just missed the music in that spot. It's not that it was not there. I just wasn't paying attention to it.
Okay, the next thing. I'm really glad they did this because I think I may have said it at the end of our last review where it's like, I hope like they track the ship that they're on. Like, they have the manifest. It's a shipping ship. Shipping. It's a cargo ship.
Yeah,
that's what I'm trying to say.
It's a slave AI on an easy to predict course.
So it's like, there's no way they don't know where they're going. And sure enough, in this episode, good writing. It's like, yeah, we tracked them. We know where they're going.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad. Like, I kind of figured, like, this is what you should do in the situation, and they did the thing, and it makes sense. Just a small thing where it's like, it's just,
and it's also good writing. It's a mining outpost, so it makes sense that they're not literally waiting at the port of entry because they land in a field with a droid that doesn't even it can't even communicate using basic. It just speaks binary, and it's not even looking in the right direction because it's not. It's just an automated system meant to unload a cargo freighter and get back to whatever it was doing. So
there's no really security measures on the vessel at all.
You don't see an Imperial for
a few minutes.
Yeah, at least a good minute.
I've been walking through the desert for a while.
Oh yeah, a good 20 miles at least of in-universe travel between points. And then they run into one of the local denizens, which this is going to be where a lot of people are going to hate on it. I know one person specifically. I won't mention his name.
Go for it.
They did a great job in this with real costumes. I love that. When I see Star Wars do something that most people will argue is a really bad move, making real costumes with a real person inside of it, and then they just either do a voiceover.
Talking about Freck?
Yes, the pilot of the ship, but also the droids. Those were real. Those were not CGI. The loader at the beginning, and then the loader in the room with them.
Oh, okay.
That was a real dude, or some sort of animatronic or something. But it was real. At least it looked real enough that it fooled me.
Didn't even think about it.
Not like IG-88 though in The Mandalorian, which is obviously completely unrealistic in certain shots. Although there is a real physical like droid they built for certain shots.
Yeah.
But those droids were all real people doing the motions of it, and I love that because it's how the original Star Wars movies were made, and it's just how practical effects were for a long time, and it looks good. It just really does, and I love old school science fiction like that. So they did good. Good on them for that.
So one of my next notes is, well, actually, let's go to Obi-Wan and Leia's conversation on the transport.
Oh yeah, I think that was my favorite part of this episode for sure.
It was really good.
There was really good character development there, and some very believable lines of dialogue where it didn't feel forced. Again, the little girl playing Leia is doing a great job with her lines.
We keep saying that. I'm going to look up her name just so we can give her proper credit.
I mean, seriously, she's doing a good job, and the lines are really believable, and they're delivered with the right amount of feel. I'm not an actor, but I know when good acting is on screen. And between Ewan McGregor and this kid, it's good. And there's a line of dialogue where there's some stormtroopers that come on, and they're asking really pointed questions, trying to figure out where they're going, who they are. And Obi-Wan is obviously very nervous and scared. And so is Leia. And they're pretending to be farmers from this random planet. And he screws up and calls her by her real name instead of the pseudonym that they're going with. And the stormtrooper calls him on it, which is pretty cool, actually.
Leia instead of Luma.
Yes, and the stormtrooper notices, which is cool because stormtroopers stereotypically are dumb and blind. They miss things and they can't shoot to save their lives. We're getting a little bit more of a fearful Empire. Stormtroopers that are...
Which is nice.
Yeah, it's a nice change of pace.
But the actress's name is Vivian Lyra Blair.
Yeah, okay. Vivian's doing a great job.
Yes.
And kudos to her, absolutely. She's enjoyable to watch as Leia. And I wasn't really into it in the first 2 episodes because there were some issues with the dialogue and the whole chase montage that looked more like a Looney Tunes episode than it did a real thing. That being said, in that sequence where they're on this transport, this mining transport, and the stormtroopers are interrogating them, Obi-Wan makes the line that the reason why he called her Leia is because it was actually her mother's name. And every time he looks at her, he sees her mother and just gets confused. And it took me a second to recognize what was happening, but he was telling the truth because obviously Obi-Wan knew Padme and had a relationship with someone that was invested in his life for like 20 years. That Anakin, from the time he was 9 years old, I believe, to the time of Revenge of the Sith, I think he was almost 30 at that point. So, and Padme, sure, I believe, was 12. So we're talking at least 15
14
years. 14, thank you.
Yeah, he was 8 and she was 14.
Okay,
Episode 1.
So at least a decade or more, probably more, closer to 15 years of time where Obi-Wan spent a lot of time in Padme's presence, and probably, I am of the opinion that he knew that there was something going on, but because
I agree.
But because Anakin was so special, they were more like brothers than master and apprentice, that he completely let it go because he just didn't want to see anything happen to either of them, and he just let it go because Obi-Wan is a bro.
That's how I read it as well.
Because he's just a bro, and for as much of a rule Nazi as he comes off as, he's actually really cares, really cares. Anyway, I could talk about that because that was just such a cool moment for me in that. And my favorite part of the episode by far, for sure.
Might be my favorite too. It's hard to say for sure because I enjoyed a lot of things about this episode. But yeah, it was... I don't really have a whole lot to add on top of what you said. It was all really good. Towards the end of when they're on the transport and then they get to the checkpoint and you have, it turns out Freck wasn't a good guy after all. He was just taking them to checkpoints. They get checked out by the Empire.
Yeah, shocker after he goes on a rant about how good the Empire is.
Man, we love the Empire. Good to meet like-minded folk.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with a little bit of order.
It's great. It was a lot of fun. But I just wrote down Stormtrooper gets cut in half.
Yeah, that was cool, actually. Because this is the first time, if I'm not mistaken, that we've seen some actual violence
human
happen.
Dismemberment,
Although it wasn't with a lightsaber. It couldn't be with a lightsaber. But he just straight up falls on a gate and splits in half.
Yeah, it was great.
And they lingered on it for a second, and I was like, oof. Okay, cool.
Just a moment like, oh, yeah, that was fun.
Jedi Fallen Order, stop making lightsabers PG. They cut things.
Yeah.
Make them cut things.
I wrote down a whole bunch of other stuff.
Vexing.
Next. Okay, so Vader murders fools.
Yeah, that was another just straight up
which was
Vader scene. Very similar to Rogue One, where he's just walking down the hallway, just butchering fools left and right.
Wonderful to see, and completely on brand. I I haven't like listened to anybody's reviews or heard people talk about this episode yet, but it's like, no, like this tracks for the guy that murdered a room full of children and randomly just chokes out people that disappoint him.
Right.
This tracks.
Always with a purpose and reason, though. Vader doesn't just kill people willy-nilly. It's always to instill fear and get results.
Some people might consider that to be willy-nilly if you're killing people just to inspire fear, but you are correct.
It's a very Stalinistic approach to
that.
leadership. It works. It's either through fear or respect. He definitely goes with the former.
When Kenobi and Leia they went to this planet to meet up with a contact there, and Tala is the person they meet up. She's an Imperial officer who's kind of
masquerading as
one. We don't actually know if she is or isn't.
Yeah.
I just read it as she was one because the troopers were with her.
It's true, but they could have just been going off the rank and officer's uniform. She could have just played the part well.
Yeah, I guess we don't know for certain, but it appeared that she's a
I like that they didn't kill her off though. I was glad though. I was like, oh, she's just gonna get off to watch.
And they meet up with her at the contact point at the little checkpoint. She kind of kills a couple troopers and gets them in town into this little like safe room kind of thing, which was cool. But then one thing that just didn't really work for me was the tunnel escape.
Yeah, it
didn't work because it didn't make sense. The sequence of events didn't make sense. Now correct me if I'm wrong here. Kenobi stays.
Yep.
Because he's going to go distract.
Yeah.
Vader, so Tala and Leia can get away.
Correct.
She needs to get Leia to the spaceport so they can get her off planet.
Right.
That's the plan.
They go running off the tunnel, Obi-Wan goes through the village.
Yeah, so Leia and Tala are heading out into the tunnel. Then maybe halfway-ish, doesn't really say, but eventually Leia was kind of saying that Tala should go back to help Kenobi. Like, Kenobi needs to come with them. Like, she's afraid for him. The dude that saved her life. She's afraid for him. So she wants Tala to go back. So Leia continues on because she's going to meet the pilot at the end of the tunnel and he'll take you to the spaceport. Like, there's people to meet along the way. You're not going to get lost kind of thing. And Tala heads back. While that is happening, Reva finds the safe room and the tunnel.
Which, to be perfectly honest, that happened way too inorganically. It was way too easy. She was like, oh, what does this do? Oh, what does this do? Oh, look at that. It was like, if this is a safe room, this is either the most poorly designed, safe hidden room I've ever seen, or Reva...
Can the Force help with that? Is that how the Force works?
Well, they didn't really make that point, and I'm going to go with Harrison Ford. That's not how the Force works. That's ridiculous.
But
There's nobody in the room.
What I was getting to, though.
But go ahead.
What I was getting to is that then Reva, heads down the tunnel, presumably, to pursue whoever left, right? But then she doesn't run into Tala. Tala makes it back outside.
I noticed that.
And Reva didn't run into Tala or Leia. Reva ends up at the end of the tunnel, having already killed the pilot, waiting for Leia.
So we're just left to assume that either Tala just takes a branch in the tunnel that we didn't see.
Which possible.
Reva never entered the tunnel to begin with and went all the way around.
But if that were the case, she would have to know where the exit of the tunnel was.
Also
and
doesn't
if
make
there's
sense.
A branch, that means there's multiple entrances and exits, which means she would have no way of knowing exactly which one.
She's either omnipotent.
It doesn't track.
Or a
That's
genius.
My point.
Or it's a plot hole.
It just doesn't make sense.
Huge plot hole. And I didn't notice that until you just brought it up. But now that you're bringing it up, I was like, oh man,
Tala's heading back and Reva just found,
she's going to meet. Just cut her in half and it's going to be over with. And then she's going to catch up to Leia.
Which I'm glad Tala survived.
Yeah.
Didn't kill her, but it's like, well, what happened there? Because it's like, here's Leia, here's Tala, here's Reva.
It's a tunnel, people. There's one way in and one way out.
5 minutes later, Tala's over here, Reva's over here, and Leia's here. It just didn't make sense.
Maybe explain to us if we missed something, but this sniffs of lazy writing in a plot hole.
Yeah, like I said, unless there's multiple tunnels,
could have been saved in the editing. Could have been saved in the editing. They could have shown us something we didn't miss, and it got cut for time.
Would have taken half a second of a shot to just show her turning right or something like that.
Yep.
And then it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Then you don't question it.
All right, so we're gonna get into the meat and potatoes of this episode. The
wait. I got it.
Okay, fine.
Make sure I covered everything else.
All
Vader murders fools. Stormtrooper cut in half. Reva's music is cool. Vader's cool. Vader's cool. I have 3 Vader's cools. Okay, Vader's still cool. Obi-Wan needs to step it up. Oh, there's fire. Well, I guess I'll just stand here.
Yeah. That's such a good way to summarize what happens. We're gonna talk about this for a minute because this is
those are my notes.
Yeah,
for verbatim.
So the meat and potatoes. In the words of Kathleen Kennedy, this is gonna be the rematch of the century, whatever she called it. This was not a rematch.
It might happen.
It might
still might happen in the future.
But rematch implies first meeting since point previous referenced, implying that it's since the battle at Mustafar where he got roasted.
Rematch, second rematch.
Possibly.
It still might happen.
It might happen. This is not it, people. This is Obi-Wan running away and then forced to fight and defend himself, which looks more like panicked blocking from a first-year lightsaber student. It's not the kind of graceful, perfect lightsaber combat. It's very barbaric. There are a couple good scenes where we see Obi-Wan's grip on the lightsaber, and having handled dozens of these in my lifetime, again, I build lightsabers for a living, that particular lightsaber, the control box is right in the center, so you have to hold it apart, or you have to like wrap your thumb around the upper portion of it. And if you guys have those style of lightsabers, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Ewan McGregor is actually doing that. There's a couple shots where he's actually doing that. They didn't like edit away the box to allow him to use a stunt saber, which would be a lot more usable. That's pretty iconic, is that these lightsabers are not exactly the easiest to duel with, with the exception of like Qui-Gon Jinn's and like Obi-Wan's first hilt that he loses in his fight with Maul. But the classic hilt that was built from like a faucet, a Mark II British hand grenade, and some other odds and ends. Mm-hmm. The grip was right, and it looks good. And you get some close-up shots of him blocking Vader's lightsaber in a cool reverse grip where he's like really pushing hard against it. Yeah. That was really cool. I did like that. But other than that, yeah, and then he just runs away and then fights and then runs away again, and then Vader
Which has been his mode so far, is to kind of live to fight another day mentality.
We must fight to run away. It's very...
Which you touched on this before. I don't want to hammer the point because you already said everything you need to, but I just wanted to
go ahead,
chime in on it, is that Obi-Wan is coming across as very... I don't want to say a defeatist. Weak, but...
lame.
It's okay. The show's not over yet.
If they course correct.
Let's see where we go.
If they bring it back.
It makes sense. Okay, he's been living, presumably having cut himself off from the Force, trying to be as inconspicuous as possible for a decade. Living on a planet, talking to nobody, doing nothing, using no Force at all. Makes sense.
And he buried his lightsaber in the middle of nowhere.
And still reeling from the fact that he, in his mind, has murdered his best friend, which he thought up until last episode, where he found out that Anakin is still alive.
Right.
So it makes sense that he is very much out of practice in universe. I think that's a reasonable explanation.
It's possible, but
like I've made the note, Obi-Wan needs to step it up, because it's like, okay,
it doesn't.
You can start here, cool, that's fine, I get it, but you gotta be a badass at some point. So we're halfway through the season.
And this is, again, somebody that in Disney canon, I'm not quoting the old EU, is said to have been one of the experts of lightsaber combat. That no one other than Mace Windu and Yoda were the equal of. And he was on the council for a long time.
So, yeah, it's just, again, I don't want to harp on that point too much. It's just like, okay, I don't have a problem with it yet, as long as we go somewhere. As long as there's some kind of development, growth, change, I get it that you have to have an arc, but...
And I'll say this,
hopefully we'll get there.
You can take one of two approaches. You can say this is creative differences where you're like, you just don't like what they're doing. They're not even being internally consistent. That's my problem. It's not that I don't like what they're doing. It's that they're not even following their own established lore. It's like nobody at Disney can read a book.
What aren't they following?
The fact that I talked about Obi-Wan being such a gifted and well-learned lightsaber duelist.
But it makes sense if he hasn't.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to get to that. That's what I was going to say. Is if they are going to get to the point where he's just rusty and needs to work the kinks out. If that's the case, let's get on it.
Which I entirely expect to be what the next episode is. Like episode 4, I expect to be about Reva has caught Leia.
And now Obi-Wan is going to
Tala
get
has
into a
now
fight with her.
rescued Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan realizes, oh, I have to like actually engage with the Force now and brush up on my skills because I have to go rescue her. And she's not just like kidnapped; she's in the hands of the Inquisitors.
Right.
Like this is a problem. That's what I'm expecting us to get to. Is like, okay, episode 4, training montage. Like,
Yeah, we're going to get a Rocky montage.
exactly.
Or
And
something.
then episodes 5 and 6 rather would be like your third
the
act,
the
actually
climactic
doing
fight.
the thing.
And we know...
That's what I'm expecting.
And I did find this out, actually. That is the Inquisitor from Rebels. He does survive.
Okay.
He does survive.
I
That is the
had
guy.
heard that it was the same guy,
It
so
is.
people were questioning. It's like, how can he be dead? It's like, well, he's
He
probably
ain't
not
dead.
actually dead.
He's not dead. But probably what's going to happen, and I will be very content if this happens, is that Reva is going to be she's going to be the penultimate, because I think season 2 actually just got announced. So we'll either see one of two things happen. I'm predicting. I'm usually wrong in this, but I think I might be right. Reva is going to be the penultimate villain of season 1. She's going to get offed by Obi-Wan,
Perhaps.
and the Grand Inquisitor is going to step back in and fill his role and be the actual foil of the second
season two?
season. Yes. Or
Could be,
we'll
could
see
be.
something. We'll see something like that, because we know from Rebels that the Grand Inquisitor is the Grand Inquisitor, and he gets killed in a battle with Kanan Jarrus. He didn't
Right.
he didn't die in that previous episode. So something's going to happen, and I think that's my prediction. But you can't take that to the bank. This is just my 10 cents worth.
But yeah, the outside of everything we talked about between Anakin and Obi-Wan, it was really cool. Like the setting was
Yes,
cool.
it was.
The
Rock Quarry was a little
this
underwhelming.
is where one of the things I don't like with inconsistent writing. Vader's badass and super powerful.
He literally
Until
just
they
like
don't want him
snaps
to-
a guy's neck.
Until they don't want him to be.
It's true. It's true. Like
Like
right up
he
until
does.
that point.
He kills 3 people. He kills 3 people in the street while just walking
to
go
draw
to
Obi-Wan
Obi-Wan.
out. It's not for no reason. It's to bring
Yeah,
him out. Like
he knows he's here. He
Trying
can
to get him
sense
to
him.
provoke
It's-
an action from
exactly.
him.
That's his goal. So
Maybe that was really obvious, but I thought maybe that might have been lost for
I thought
a few people.
that
but
was my thought.
It's
with it.
pretty obvious, so
Yeah.
that's the reason.
That like it's not killing people just to kill people. Like the motivation is to kill innocent people because Obi-Wan
provoke
will
and draw
be
out Obi-Wan.
drawn out by that to try and
Save them,
be the good guy.
which he doesn't. He just watches.
Yeah, yeah. But because and then he like lifts him up, lifts Obi-Wan up in the air, and his lightsaber falls, and he like sparks a bunch of rocks on the ground. There's fire, and he's like dragging Obi-Wan through the fire. It's like, yeah, like
Real vindictive.
and like okay, I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah, it was really
And
vindictive.
then the fire goes out. I'm assuming because Vader put the fire out. But
or
the fire went out. The fire just
it
went,
did. Yeah, it did.
So I'm assuming it was just Vader that's like, okay, you can go out now because he's Vader.
Right.
And because he kind of throws Obi-Wan away, but then the Tala like shoots the rocks again, so the fire starts again.
She shot the
She shot something.
something, and it exploded and reignited everything.
And-
And then Darth Vader's like,
before
fire,
before
fire
that,
bad.
yeah, before that, he throws Kenobi, and Vader's like, bring him to me. Which, like, one could say he can do it himself, which he can, but also, dude's kind of petty.
Yeah,
And on a
that's
power trip, so like, okay, that makes sense. I'm just going to wreck shop. I'm like, no, you go do this now.
Right.
I get it. It makes sense. But then, when Tala explodes the thing, reignites the fire, like we just saw, he could have reignited the fire and just pulled Kenobi back when it was apparent that the stormtroopers are not going to be able to do that.
right, but he's just
And he
like
doesn't,
fire.
so he just stands
fire
there.
Bad.
That's why I wrote, like,
And then the
I'll
droid,
just stand here.
and then the droid just walks up in the woman, and they just pick him up and carry him off.
So that part just felt weird, where it's like, Vader's super powerful and cool until they just don't need him to be for the sake of storytelling. A little inconsistent, that I'll just kind of, bothered me a bit.
Not as prolific as Rogue One, where every rebel soldier in that hallway,
They did.
and they knew they were going to die.
So dead.
And the panic at the end when the guy's
Like, I
banging
just
on the
wish
door
they
to
could
hand
have
him the
they could
code
have
key.
done it just
A little bit better.
a little bit better. Where like
It's not Gareth
you know,
Edwards though.
where they like with again, just a little bit better. Have Talos shoot something that explodes, that does more than just light the fire, causes just a little bit more of a distraction.
Or maybe have,
And
like,
then-
Vader, like, yank her off the hillside. She's, like, literally 15 yards away.
Or
There's no
just-
way he can't sense her through the Force, pull her over, interrogate her as Obi-Wan, like, limps off with the droid or a speeder comes
Or you can
up.
still have
Something
them both.
believable.
You can still have them both get away.
But something more believable than fire rocks.
Yeah,
Like, it's all
it
the...
just felt weird.
Yeah.
Other than that, the rest of the scene was really cool.
Yeah. Except for the fact that if you just realize that they're just burning charcoal, and Vader probably has PTSD from fire, so he's like a full Frankenstein moment. Apparently, Stormtrooper's like, I'm not going over there. You going over there? I'm not going over there. It was really kind of a dumb moment where you're right. It didn't make sense. It was bad editing right there.
Yeah,
But,
it kind of. That was the only part.
and they just get away.
Story-wise, that kind of. There has to be just a better way.
So Reva's got a portal
I don't have
gun.
a problem with what happened. It's just some of the bits that made it
Yeah,
happen.
so
didn't
Reva's
quite
got a
make
portal
sense.
gun, and Vader is afraid of fire.
Yep. If we learned anything today, that's what we learned.
Yep. Yeah.
But overall, the more we've talked about this episode, I really like this episode.
It is
There's
good.
a lot of stuff
There
to
is
like
there
in
is a
this.
lot to like, and I will say this: for as much as I really don't like what Star Wars has become, and how so much of what myself and a lot of other people really held to be kind of sacred texts, as ridiculous as that sounds, there's a lot of good things. You just have to find the things you enjoy about it, and that's with anything in life. It's just you can't complain about everything, people. You really can't.
And you're not going to like 100% of everything anyway.
And here's the thing, too. It's not forever. Someday, I guarantee it, we'll all be old. Somebody will dust off the cobwebs from Star Wars, and it'll get drug out and rehashed again. And maybe it'll be perfect then. You just got to wait to see it.
No, I firmly believe that Star Wars fans will never like Star Wars.
I mean, I'm living proof that there's things to enjoy about it.
Yes.
I'm just willing to wait it out until somebody who actually gives a damn about Star Wars gets the reins to Star Wars. Like,
Sure.
if Dave Filoni or Jon Favreau were in charge creatively the same way that Kevin Feige is, you would see nothing but praise from me. For, like, I'd be telling people to go out and see and consume everything that there is to do with Star Wars. I loved The Mandalorian. I loved everything about it. I think that Boba Fett was not so great because they kind of changed directions and they didn't really stay true to the character's nature. But that wasn't Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni. That was more of a Kathleen Kennedy oversight. Even though Filoni and Favreau were directly over it, I think they tried something that just didn't work. And I think it's because they got told to do so. And I think that's just how it is.
I don't know.
Because I think Kennedy was absorbed with her, I think it's Blood and Bone series that's going to be coming out. And John and Dave just got left to their own devices for Mandalorian, and they took full advantage of it. And that's why we got the Luke Skywalker sequence at the end of Season 2, and we got Cara Dune, and the absolute just barbarian that was Boba Fett in the 2 episodes we got to see him in, do Boba Fett. And then after that, he's, as one of my other favorite channels calls him, he's basically Space Fredo. He's like the second brother of the Corleone family that's just kind of sucks at being a bad guy. Anyway, I digress. Episode 2 or Episode 3 of Obi-Wan, it's a 7. There's things to like, there's things to not like. But just realize that the sun will come up tomorrow, people, if you don't like it.
There's a lot of stuff to like. I actually maybe like it a little bit more after having like talked through everything. There's some things I didn't like, for sure. But the first 2 episodes were definitely more action-packed, but you had more character development in this. You had, I don't know, just some cool, enjoyable scenes.
Yeah.
Just fun stuff.
And remember
just fun
remember
stuff.
too, there's something that's absolutely true. Again, if you really didn't like it, because I feel for you. I hate the new movies. I really hate them. And it's not because of anything against the actors. I think all of them are decent enough. I think it's just lousy writing. Remember, though, the books still exist. If you want to read the old EU books, do it. They're great. I've done it multiple times, and no one can ever take that away.
Yeah.
I have an entire collection and library of those things. And if that's what you want Star Wars to be, I understand how you feel betrayed by Disney, especially because they keep telling you that you're a bad person for not liking new Star Wars because you're racist or homophobic or bigoted or something. Some ist thing that they just want to slap a label on you because you don't like crappy storytelling. Just go read the old books, play the old games.
Yeah.
It's still good. It's still enjoyable.
Yeah, and it's still there. Always be there.
It will.
So.
If you have the books, they'll always exist unless you do something with them.
Yeah, just like whatever you want.
It's true. Like whatever you want. Some things are better than others, but if you're of the
just
opinion
because something is good or bad doesn't mean you should or shouldn't like it.
I mean, I would argue that point, but I think people have a right to dislike what they want to dislike and like what they want to like.
My point being is like just because a movie or something is bad doesn't mean you can't like it, and just
that's
because
fair.
something is objectively good doesn't mean you're supposed to like it.
That's a good point too. And I mean, I think that just right now everybody is on the praise train because there's just a lot of stuff going on in the world right now, and it will come full circle. It always does. And we probably will see a resurgence of classic Star Wars, and you'd be a fool to think that at some point we won't see the expanded universe get mined for the just pure gold that it is, because it will eventually come out. There's no way that it can't. Because once they've exhausted all of their terrible writers, and they've pissed off every good director, and they've scared away all of the paying people, they're going to have to figure out that in order to make money, you have to give people what they want. And whether or not you agree with that as a producer does not negate the fact that people like what they like. And if they're not paying, then you need to change your approach. And Disney just hasn't learned that yet. And until people just walk away completely, which they kind of are, it's just slowly happening, they're not going to learn that lesson. So vote with your dollar. If you like it, great. If you don't, that's your decision too.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to wrap up this week's episode. If you liked this episode, please leave us a like and subscribe to the channel if we've earned it. And leave us a comment and let us know what you like or disliked. If you didn't like the video, thank you for sticking around. We still appreciate your viewership. If you would share this video with those of your friends and family who you know would appreciate it and like our content, we would really appreciate that. And I'll let Jeremiah take it from there.
Yeah, and if you're listening to us on Spotify, you can follow and leave us a review there. That'll help us out over on that end. But yeah, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.